From time to time, the Supreme Court corrects prior errors. It happened with Plessy versus Ferguson, which was a bad decision. We've all acknowledged that, along with Dred Scott, along with Korematsu, are bad decisions. I like it when the Supreme Court is able to correct prior errors. That is what occurred with Dobbs. Dobbs corrected a prior error. It's difficult to endure hearing people say that they're worried about the credibility of the court, when sometimes those words are uttered by people who are themselves actively, willfully, deliberately attacking the credibility of the court, sometimes as officers of the court. We're seeing this through unfair attacks on Justice Thomas and other members of the U.S. Supreme Court, and it's got to stop. Look, Dobbs was right. As a matter of constitutional law, this is a matter not for the courts to decide, but for elected lawmakers, typically in state legislatures, not our national legislature. So if you don't like the policy outcome, go to your state legislature. But this is not an issue in which the federal judiciary is somehow empowered. There is no reproductive rights clause of the U.S. Constitution. So let's not pretend that we're worried about the credibility of the court if we are simultaneously attacking the credibility of the court and its ability to do its job. Now, a lot of these issues relate to this legislation that's been introduced in the wake of the Dobbs decision, which is itself way more radical even than Roe versus Wade was, and way more radical than where Americans are comfortable going. You know, 69% of Americans are uncomfortable with abortion after the first trimester, 69%. But you'd never guess that from the way Democrats in the United States Senate vote on these issues, where essentially all of them support or appear to be comfortable with second and third trimester abortions. And in fact, all but I think 2 members of the Democratic caucus in the United States Senate voted against the Borderline Abortion Survivors Act. And so this legislation Democrats are now pushing would prohibit any state law from regulating abortion within a state's borders, essentially ever, not to protect girls, not to protect women, not to protect health, safety, and welfare, not to protect the rights of a baby born alive. Now, putting aside for a moment the life of the child, when considering the health impact of abortion on women, I think there are important considerations to make. Dr. Ingrid, Dr. Scott, I'd like to start with you. What concerns do you have for the physical and mental well-being of women who have late-term abortions?
It's well established that women who have late-term abortions are at much higher risk for mental health complications, as we mentioned, anxiety, depression, substance use and abuse, and suicidal ideation and self-harm.
Let's talk about suicide for a minute. Those who have second or third trimester abortions, late-term abortions, do they have, what do their higher suicides look like?
In the United States, we do not have data on this because, as I mentioned, backing up to maternal mortality, this is data is collected until a full year after the end of the pregnancy, and it is virtually impossible because the CDC mostly looks at death certificates. It's virtually impossible to link say a coerced abortion and a suicide 6 months later.
Right.
And I don't think that there are many efforts to do this.
By the way, how many abortions are medically indicated, medically necessary?
Using the definition that the intent is to kill the baby, I would say none. As we discussed earlier, occasionally there is the need to do a separation of the mother and the baby. The intent in that case is to save the mother, and sometimes the baby regrettably dies. But even if you use that or if you said that, well, that counts as an abortion, it's still far less than 1% of the abortions in our country.
Very good to know. Now, as you have noted, women are 4 times more likely to experience serious medical complications from a chemical abortion as a surgical abortion. Why is the abortion industry pushing chemical abortion? Does it have more to do with the fact that this is an industry that makes a lot of money off of that? Or does it have more to do with the fact that that dispenses with a lot of inconvenient things, like the fact that we've got Planned Parenthood clinics that have been caught on tape telling girls not to tell the age of the person having the abortion, because then they would have a duty to report it. What is that? What's causing that?
I think there are definitely advantages for the abortion industry to promote chemical abortions. They don't have to hire a surgeon, pay for sterilization of instruments and the costs that go along with that. And the reality I would like to acknowledge is that, again, about 90% of obstetricians do not perform abortions, and even obstetricians who claim to be pro-choice, many of them will not perform surgical abortions. So I think there was a staffing issue that began the promotion toward chemical abortion. There may be some advantages in terms of funding, but now that we see—
Is there a profit motive, perhaps? Could that—
There was a time that the cost of a surgical abortion and a chemical abortion were approximately the same, an average of about $575. But I think we also see, in light of states beginning to have pro-life restrictions, that this is a way to get around those restrictions and provide abortions in states that are trying to protect unborn life.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see my time has expired.